Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words from some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our daily gun show. Coming to you live each weeknight at midnight Eastern, and we talk about guns for an hour or so, depending. And this is a panel discussion. At least the show has evolved into a panel discussion made up of people that are invited via email, as well as members of Gun Channels. Gun Channels is a community we built, going on real close to 6 years now. A place for conversations like this. So if you're interested in being part of this panel discussion about guns, then let us know over in Gun Channels. So we got Dead Horse joining us from Utah. Thanks for jumping in.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, going weird over there. And is that just me? And then we got Dan No jumping in from Illinois. Thanks for joining.
Yep, glad to be here.
And let's see, I'm in Arizona. And like I say, I just sent out emails to join this to quite a few people. So I see Ghost is out there. Host is out there on the YouTube side. Is that because you're still being Ubered? You realize this guy Ubers from Arkansas to Dallas?
Yeah, I watched his live stream earlier. I was watching it happen live. I was amazed.
What a jerk. And not only does he Uber, but then he live streams the whole time, just rubbing it in the face of the Uber driver that he's just sitting there relaxing, having a good time on the internet.
Actually, I thought it was a third arm because as he was talking, and of course a lot of people talk with their hands, occasionally you see this third arm approaching somewhat of a steering wheel. So it's like, he's got 3 arms. He's got 3 hands.
In the future, will we just sew on extra arms? Like if people are not using one or they're dead or whatever, like we can just sew that arm on and start using it?
Arms for the homeless, or arms from the homeless.
Oh, I like you're saying a homeless person make a couple extra bucks, could sell off like some fingers or an arm.
It's like, you're not using those hands.
Yeah.
I would totally get a third arm like sewed on me, like underneath my left arm or something.
That's
like,
the question. Do you put the third arm like right in the middle of your chest, on your back, like over your shoulder, or you're talking underneath your armpit?
Yeah, like right underneath my left arm. I wouldn't want it on my right arm, I think. I don't think I wouldn't want it there. I would just want the third arm right underneath my left arm. Have 2 on that side to make up for like, the weak armness, right, of your left arm.
I can see it. What about like a smaller arm? Like if you look at like some kind of alien movie where they'll have like maybe a bug or something or a crab or something, they'll have like bigger arms and then smaller arms going down their ribs.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
There's things that should be said on air and things that happen off air, and this
exactly. It's like, where is this arm going? What is it doing?
Right,
anyway,
so today's topic: two-way wish list. Gun owners utopia. There's no more gun laws. What's the world like? It's going to be pretty
Crime
quick.
and murder rates drop 80%.
It's probably going to be like a 14-minute show because there's 3 of us on here.
The millennials suddenly understand respect. And the world is at one. Well, at least we are at one. Maybe not the rest of the world, but our country.
So, like, how did this come about? I think it's like important. Like, how did this all come about, though? Like, has to be some context to that.
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I didn't think about that. I was just thinking about the consequences of, but you're right. It could, if it was through fascism or like socialism or something, that would suck. There's no more gun laws because there's no more laws, like there's no more guns, I guess, because you don't need laws. Everybody just obeys the state. But now, I don't know. Ideally be when like we show through education and responsibility and just good times that recreational and investment and whatever other reasons people want to own firearms is a good idea, and that there should be no infringements because it was a ridiculous thing to begin with. And just like prohibition, they say, oh, that was a mistake, and they remove it.
I see 2 routes that it can occur. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dead Horse.
No, go. I have a feeling you're going to go right where I was going to go, Dano. So go for
Okay,
it.
well, and there's two routes. One is legislatively, which is kind of what G. Webs was referring to. The people via their legislators go ahead and say, we're going to strike down the 1934 Gun Control Act and all gun acts since in one simple fell swoop and default back to the Bill of Rights.
Oh, I think they fall. I think you get rid of NFA and everything falls. It's the keep or whatever,
So
right?
that's one route through the legislature. The second route would be through the judicial, and that's that a ruling comes down from the Supreme Court that finds that the only law that is true, that is valid, is that does not infringe on your gun rights, and all prior decisions have infringed. Therefore, they are null and void.
So, Dano didn't go where I thought he was going to go.
Okay.
So,
okay.
G. Web sent me this awesome book a while back about the Second Amendment. And in this book, it goes through some of the other countries, even back in like the 15 and 1600s, about gun laws, right? And specifically, it talks about a lot of countries that basically had gun laws and gun restrictions and lost a lot of their rights, and then eventually gained them back, right? And just judging on the history of that, things usually seem to get worse before they get better. And a lot of times, it wasn't until things got so bad and the people got so fed up, it was really just a more monumental change took place, like an entire new country almost, or at least a new government or something like that's usually put in place. And I hate to say it, but that just from history point of view, that seems to be a thing.
Well, look at the point that you were making about prohibition, about how, like, oh yeah, they realized that it wasn't working, so they repealed the laws. Like, what had to happen first? Like, the gangs had to get out of control to the point where the murder rate was getting so high and all these other things were going on until people were just like, holy cow, I didn't realize it was all this. Like, and
that's not really as analogous as one might think, because the vast majority of people, whether it's once a year or every day, partake in alcohol, where that's not necessarily the case in what we find as our passion.
I partake in firearms every day, sir.
I don't drink hardly ever, and
you may, but we are in the minority, and we need to, at least as far as thinking out a path forward, deal from a position that's well grounded in fact. And the fact is, we are in the minority.
Hold on. Do you really? I mean, that's an assumption there. I mean, unless you know something that I don't know, I'd never really looked into this. Maybe you have. Is there some number of people who drink alcohol? I mean, I don't drink alcohol.
Simply look at the amount of people actively involved in their livelihoods or part-time income. Is a lot of people who made it through the Depression era did it through multiple income streams. They had multiple what we would call part-time jobs to make a living for their family. And back then it was a real thing to, whether it was, you got a couple extra bucks to turn a blind eye as a part-time security, or you were actually making the stuff or transporting the stuff or selling the stuff.
Oh, you're talking about back in the 20s or during Prohibition, who was dealing with alcohol. Yeah, I think it would be artificially inflated. I think also.
I'm addressing E. Honda's comment in regards to alcohol. And
oh no, I just thought you were talking about now. I agree with you from back then. I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
Well, my point wasn't necessarily about the number of people, but it was the point about how bad things have, how things have to get bad before people get off their butt to do anything about it, right? Like humans are a party animal. As long as, we got the food and the warmth and, whatever drink in your hand or whatever that you like we're pretty much okay with whatever else is going on generally,
Well, that is a historical weakness of mankind. If you look back to the Romans, is a great example of bread and circuses.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is going through history of even that book even goes through other weapon laws, even dating back before firearms. And it's just amazing that almost in every instance, crime had to run so rampant, or, just stuff had to get so bad for there to be real implemented change. And that seems to be a common repeating factor. So it's not that what I want to happen, but I'm just thinking realistically, that might what has to happen. Things might have to get bad before it gets better.
Well, it's also amazing too, like when you look at the history of just the United States, how long it took us to get police officers, right? And it wasn't until the gangs of New York, like where there were all these orphan children running around New York City causing problems, where the people finally said, you know what, I can't deal with this. We need to have some police officers for the city, and that was the first police force in the United States.
Well, there's been law enforcement predating that. I mean, if you're referring to stay in town only type law enforcement, yes.
Well, there was always federal marshals,
right? But they had roam of city and state and county. I mean, it's like state police. They weren't limited to the town.
Yeah, and you guys are also talking about like the United States of America. So long before that, when people were here, there was always a fire watch, and the fire watch usually was a criminal or an escaped slave. And that would be their punishment, would be to sit on fire watch at night and to basically wake anyone if a fire broke out and stuff like that. But that was really the first origins of our policing force here in America. And then right after that, we pretty much copied hand in hand everything the British was doing.
Well, it was the system that our forefathers knew. So, I mean, it's understandable why they took that and then modified it to this new country, this new way of thinking.
But, you know, and we called them like fire watchers and stuff, but they also watched out for like chicken thieves and stuff like that. But really the first law enforcement in our country, really, they were criminals. Believe it or not.
Well, you know, there was private security again, whether it's, you know, you have a ranch out west or you have something else where you would pay, you know, whether it be cowboys or somebody else to come in and ride the range at night just to keep your cows, you know, on your ranch. And at least act as a deterrent. And that's just as true whether it's out on the plains or whether it's, you know, down in the hood. I mean, if you don't ride the range, then, you know, bad people will come and take advantage of that.
Speaking of bad people coming and taking our cows, let's introduce everybody who's been joining us around the campfire. We've got a Cycle Camp jumping in from Connecticut. Thanks for joining.
Hi, folks. Have a good evening.
We got Dead Horse already still here from Utah. Then we got Honda jumping in from Colorado. Thanks for jumping in.
Thanks, man. Thanks for the invite.
And Ghost is still en route, or
just got home.
Oh, right on, in Arkansas. So I think I interrupted Dano talking about cattle wrestling.
Well, Ghost has got to tuck that third hand back in his pocket.
I'll use that for cow tipping.
Going back to your the statement about alcohol, referring to it, I don't know what the percentage was back in the 1920s during Prohibition, but I'm seeing stuff here like 70% of people report that they've drank in the last year. 56% in the last month.
I mean,
86% in their lifetime. So,
yeah, and that goes to my point of whether it's once a year or daily. There are people who drink or consume alcohol on a large scale. So the vast majority of people, i.e., more than 50%, have an interest in keeping alcohol flowing.
Hold on.
Where in firearms, it's not greater than 50%.
Hold on. I don't know if we're now talking about what context, if we're talking in the 20s or if we're talking about now. But let's talk about now. And if we're talking about now, if someone drinks a beer or champagne for a celebration, like somebody, there's a million things you drink a beer for. There's a million things you drink a bottle of champagne or a glass of champagne for. There's probably something you drink wine for. And if those traditional or celebratory things, criminal, what am I trying to say? Doing the thing, communion on Sundays. Are you going to ask? Are they going to say yes? I had wine in my system, or what? So to suggest that someone has experienced alcohol.
We're not talking about drunkenness. We're just partake in alcohol.
No, but I'm saying that you can't just say that because there's so many people that'll sip something or casually drink something socially and they wouldn't consider themselves a drinker, and they could probably care less one way or the other, the same way a lot of people care less one way or the other about guns.
My definition, for simplicity's sake, is very simple. You partake, whether that's a sip or whether that's a whole glass or whether that's a series of glasses.
Okay, well, that's argumentative. Here's my point. If someone sips once a year, they don't have any interest in alcohol, any interest at all in alcohol laws, right?
Okay.
They don't care at all if they never sip again, right?
Okay, so somebody who has one sip a year is not part of my discussion. All right, gotcha. You got me.
Well, here's another point about alcohol versus firearms, right? There were roughly 11,000 people who died from traffic fatalities with alcohol involved, meaning that they had a 0.08 higher blood alcohol content. And then you look at how many people died from firearms, discounting suicides and righteous gun shootings from defensive or police officers. It's what, like 6,000 people? And yet, if you look at the media and what they're talking about, it seems, because of what they talk about and how they talk about it, that the guns are a much, much bigger, more prolific problem than anything else going on. But then you actually look at the statistics and you see that it's almost double the people die just in car accidents from alcohol than kill people with guns.
And that's only one of the ways that alcohol is destructive.
Right. That's not even including, because like if you look at child abuse, or if you look at spousal abuse, or if you look at like homelessness problems, they're all related to alcohol, like in some way or another. Not necessarily a one-to-one direct correlation, but you find a higher percentage of the people who like get a domestic violence charge have alcohol involved than don't. As a for instance.
I've been doing some research as we've been talking here, and yeah, it turns out that there is some problems with alcohol use. It looks like 100% of 9mm owners have used alcohol.
You mean at this moment?
Oh no, just sipped it once in one point in their lifetime, and that killed enough brain cells to make them have poor decision-making skills.
Yeah.
Anyway,
my point was
started
really to try to say is there are people are the ones that do this thing called vote that politicians want, and there are a lot of people who have a vested interest in keeping alcohol to be readily available.
Okay. I don't know where this even came from, but we started out with, what if there were no gun laws? And then Dead Horse said, where did that, how did it originate?
Trying to get it back
into. Okay, go ahead, get it back there.
If there aren't as many gun owners as there are people who consume alcohol, that's why alcohol, although it's heavily taxed, is a sin tax because it's viewed as bad, but it's still out there. But yet pro-gun stuff does not get the energy push behind it because it doesn't have nearly as many people that, again, have a vested interest in pushing that forward. Even though it's the same category as far as like sin taxes, or it's viewed that way.
There were no gun laws, I would go buy an M16 so fast. Now here's a question, because I wasn't around before, the 86.
Yep.
80, yeah, but isn't it true that you could basically buy an M16 for the same, like a Colt M16 for the same price as you could for a Colt AR-15? You just had to pay the extra $200 tax stamp. It was like in the gun store, it was basically the same price, or is that incorrect?
It was not the same price, but I don't remember the exact price. But you'd still have to do the NFA tax stamp thing.
Right. But I'm saying like that was the major difference. It was just that. Like versus now, if you wanted to buy an M16, what did we see one on Gun Broker for $57,000 the other day? It was like freaking ridiculous.
As well as, and I'm not sure why, but at least where I live, they were not nearly as popular as other arms.
Yeah, they just weren't popular. If an AR-15 was $315, like a M16 would have been like what, 400 or something. It wasn't hardly any different. The tax stamp was more significant than the difference, if I remember right.
Right.
Well, plus the weighting difference. too.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I don't know enough people that did it to know what the waitings were like.
Yeah, well, in Illinois, we still had, waiting periods, back then, because I bought guns before that time period. And I remember having to wait. I want to say it was 24 hours. They call it the cool off.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the time that it take them to process your Form 1 or Form 3 or whatever to get. Yeah. I'm sure that it probably wasn't 9 months like it is now, but
yeah,
I'm sure it was something
then like I am now, and we have no NFA items, so I wouldn't even know anybody that had that as an option.
Wow, Illinois has always been good, huh?
Oh yeah, it's always been this good.
Wow.
Having uncles that bought guns back then, from what I know, the waiting times were exactly pretty much what they are now, months and months and months. And like nothing has really changed.
And what's ironic is that was via snail mail versus, you can submit it electronically and they can send it back to you electronically. And, you would think things would be faster via technology, but they're not, because it's still the government.
You got to remember, there's basically an investigation opened up. So.
No, I understand that part.
I wish ammo was cheaper.
The thing to know is how much deeper or wider is it than what's done on a 4473 in regards to that phone call that's made.
Well, and here's another interesting thing that I learned about.
And I don't have an answer.
That in New York City back in the 30s, they had shooting galleries inside of Central Park. So there were areas in Central Park where people would get together and bring their little gallery guns, little 22, I forget like what kind of, the calibre rounds or whatever, like the gallery guns that they would shoot. And they would sit around and drink and smoke cigars and drink brandy and have shooting competitions in the middle of Central Park in New York. Imagine them doing that now.
Responsibility was viewed very differently then than it is today.
Well, I agree, and I think that
people just setting up at a bench. He's saying there was like a facility for it.
I mean, I don't think it was anything like official, like, hey, this is the spot where we're always going to be. But people like picked a good spot and set stuff up and did it, and no one blinked an eye at it. It was just, hey, I want a gallery gun too, so I can participate. It wasn't like, oh, those young whippersnappers over there are shooting their boomsticks again. It was just accepted. It was normal. It was like playing darts at the bar.
All right, so Cycle Camp, 2A wish list, gun owners, Utopia, no more gun laws. Where do we go? What happened?
So by no more gun laws, you mean no more laws about guns themselves, not laws about what people do with them. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, exactly. If you're meaning like there's still murder and there's still responsibility and that.
No, but I mean like there's laws that say you can't fire a gun within so many feet of a house,
sure.
And just stuff like that. And there's civic. Those are civic, reasonable, civic, responsible. You can't go down the middle of Main Street firing guns in the air and shit like that.
Yeah, so, just like you can't do things to bother other people in other ways. Yeah, but otherwise, there's
the firearms themselves. No limit on firearms, no limitations on firearms, no limitations on ownership. Buy them, sell them, do whatever you want. Maybe still need to do the business thing where still come up with a definition of how many do you have to buy and sell in a year to be considered a business, which I still don't think anybody actually understands. But yeah, that makes.
Well, why do you think that there should still be that? In other words, the FFL thing. Why do you want that still?
Well, it's not so much the FFL thing; it's the business regulation thing, and as a good what do you call it? Conservative, I should say the government shouldn't get involved in anybody's buying and selling, but yeah, so you could tax them and all that kind of crap. You know, like it would still be a felony to sell a. Well, there would still be prescripted persons, right? There still be people. I don't know. Me
In
and
the
Yankee
lack
would have-
of gun laws, wouldn't it be the complete burden of the individual to, you know, it would be their responsibility and obligation to comply? So if somebody illegally obtained with ill malice, whatever the word would be, that'd be on that person and not whoever they obtained it from in an absence of laws.
I think
right, but where would I go if I put a gun up for sale and a stranger wanted to buy it, and I mean I honestly don't know this guy, but I don't give a shit. It's my property and I just want to sell it. I'm absolved then. If anything he does with it after that, I'm absolved from that, right? Because there's no gun laws, there's no NICS checks, there's no any of that shit.
Yeah, the same way it's been for most of us for all the time. But yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I
At
would
least
think
within a state.
I would think they'd be a lot more careful about who they let out of prison once they are in, you know? Because, like, if there's no gun law that says, like, anyone, you know, like, anyone can buy a gun at any time from anybody, period, right? Which means anyone who's not in prison can buy a gun. So if there's, like, proven violent people, you might not want to let them out so easily, you know?
Yeah, and that was the point I was trying to make. So and I sort of agree with Yankee on that one, that if you think a guy is so unsafe that he can't be trusted to exercise his rights, maybe you ought to just keep him behind bars.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
But I don't think you ought to keep people that get caught on the street for a half an ounce of weed behind bars, you know. So it's good, that kind of thing. So yeah, I you know, there's that whole safety versus freedom thing. And I think if guns if they weren't stigmatized the way they are today, and it wasn't so incredibly difficult to carry in many states, that a lot more people would be, you know, it'd be like it was, you know, 40 years ago when I was a kid, 40, 50 years ago when I was a kid. And they were just a part of everyday life, and it was a tool. It was a very dangerous tool, just like a skill saw is a very dangerous tool. But you learn, you know, I learned not to frig with my father's skill saw, and I absolutely never frig with my father's guns. And it was, but it wasn't unusual or out of the ordinary. And I think people were safer.
You gave kids responsibility and then consequences for things like their bicycle, which gave them an ability to get far enough away that they could get lost and then, you know, have bad consequences. Gives them a chance to become like a moving, you know, issue. They get in the way of stuff or break stuff or knock into stuff or get hurt, right? And then it was money. Those bicycles weren't cheap, so if you weren't paying attention, it gets stolen or lost or broken, damaged, whatever, you misplaced. You know, that was a financial responsibility. So we had responsibilities as little kids that, you know, a BB gun was just another layer of that, right? Same with, okay, I need you to go up on the roof and fix that thing with the hammer. Like, no, not to go up there and smack a bunch of extra holes in the roof or whatever. Like, it was just...
In my house when I was growing up, if I can share this for a moment, we had when I was a child, it was a very simple rule. And so you didn't have to worry about, you know, variations and all sorts of stuff. When you're a kid, you have a very simple mind. And that is, you're not allowed to touch any adult things without direct permission and supervision, whether that's mom's big knives or the electric thing that cuts turkeys, or whether it's dad's tools in the garage, or whether it's, you know, other things. If it's adult stuff, you can't touch it. Can I help you?
I'm just giving you some ambiance in your stories.
Okay. I'm done. Next.
But I agree. I mean, I think you make the point that I was starting with, which was guns weren't treated any differently around my house than any other dangerous tool. And you had to prove that you were going to be responsible. But unlike today, oh, my little Johnny would never. No, it was trust but verify. You know what I mean? Your parents gave you a certain amount of leeway, but they were always watching it like a hawk to make sure you weren't screwing around with stuff.
I got a friend that'll tell you as soon as you start talking to him about BB guns, about how the idiot across the street said that he did something, to his mom. His mom told his dad. His dad got home from work, took his BB gun and wrapped it around the pole in their garage, like the upright in the garage holding the roof up. And he didn't get a chance to, there was no jury of his peers or nothing. Like his mom was told, his dad was told, bam, the BB gun was destroyed. And that was the consequences, right?
Yeah, well, people are douchebags no matter what. I mean, I had exactly that same situation when my nephew used to live with me, and something happened around the house, and it was exactly the kind of thing that he would do, and I tore him a new asshole. And my next door neighbor came over and said, "I just want to let you know, your kid didn't do that. I saw the kids that did it, and he wasn't one of them." And I had to actually go back and apologize to him. Now I know a lot of people's parents don't do stuff like that, but I actually had to go back and admit that I was wrong and apologize to him.
What that does is that shows that when good men make mistakes, that's what they do, and that was probably just as important as correcting him when he made his mistakes, was you correcting yourself to the person that you did wrong to. Is good men make mistakes, and when they do, they apologize.
Right. They stand up and they admit they're wrong, and they try to make it right.
Or if you're like my dad, you just double down on what you said and continue with life.
Well, those are people
if
that
you've got respect for the person that you wronged in your error. You definitely want to make that known, right, to that person. Like, hey, whoa, I apologize, and that was my bad.
Absolutely.
I still think the bottom line with firearms is we can't control the behavior, so we try to move the fault to the item, and that is the thing that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And most gun laws try to move the instantiating force, which is a human being, and they try to change it into the availability of a firearm or the lethality of a firearm, or they try to take all of these concepts, which guns are not lethal, people are lethal. And it's very, most of the gun laws try to restrict behavior instead of just punishing bad behavior. And since we don't, unfortunately, at least here where I live, if we don't punish people, we charge a shitload of people. And we did this study. I probably said this to a lot of guys in the audience have probably heard this before. We actually did a study on gun charges over the last 10 years, and we found out that overall about 67% of all charges get nollied by the prosecutors, which means they just say, nope, take it off the table, we're just not going to prosecute that. And the ones that have the really highest percentage are the ones that you'd expect to have been the ones that help the most, like the ones with mandatory minimums about gun theft, use of a firearm in commission of a crime, stuff like that. They throw that shit out all the time if you're a criminal, because they use those charges as leverage to get you to turn over on people that are higher up in your organization.
Yeah, we'll reduce the charges if you plead guilty to this other thing.
Or you tell us who your boss was, or you give us the names of the guys that your accomplices. Whereas a guy like me that gets hit with a gun charge, there's no reason for me.
That's it.
I'm an honest guy, and they're just going to screw me to the full extent of the law.
Just remember what Jesus said: if you don't have an AR-15, sell your coat and buy one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did say that.
Well, he said sword.
He said sword, but if you have a 9mm, sell it and buy something bigger.
Hey, that's a good point. So currently, like, the way that the gun laws work in America is you can't have like a rifle round or a handgun round that's over 50 caliber, right? If there was no law like that, what kind of bullets do you think we might have?
I don't think it's so much the bore, the diameter, or whatever. I think though that when you remove the infringement or the restrictions on full auto, then you have a massive thirst and demand for more projectiles, and very little interest in their effectiveness ballistically, other than hitting targets accurately or consistently. So I think we've got all kinds of potential with ceramic barrels and ceramic projectiles. Look at the way that an Olympic or even a competition gun looks like a race car compared to like a a practical gun looks like a tank, or like an actual military gun looks more like a tank or a Humvee. They strip them down to the bare minimums. They make them skeletonized, and why wouldn't they do that with machine guns as well? So I think when you have the absence of infringements, you've got the abundance of innovation and interest and availability. The costs go down, so people can afford full auto. And look at what happens with ARs, and look what happens with AR pistols. Once people have one, they're like, oh, okay, now I understand what you can do with this small thing in this platform, and they start fiddling with it. So it would be exactly the same. We will see a massive expanse of the industry, or the community in the competition sports in full auto, and just plain old recreation. New targets will be created, and maybe some of them will have some kind of ingenious way of trapping or magnetizing or something, like the projectiles, incorporating the projectiles into a reusable thing, like maybe for BBs or something, where they're more like they can just be re-put into something and reshaped into a perfect sphere or something. But I think that we see massive innovation in projectiles as soon as there's less restriction on ownership.
I'm not sure, to go back to his original point about like the 50 caliber limit. If machine guns were all legal tomorrow, first of all, the price of machine guns would drop drastically. Collectors would take a pretty big hit, but the collectors collect things not because they're valuable. They're not investments. I guess some do, but they collect them because they're historical and all that kind of crap.
They represent a point of history, and that's not going to change.
That will not change.
A new Tommy gun made today is not a Tommy gun that was used in World War II, Korea, or Vietnam, or all three.
Right, and that's my point. I don't think guys should be going out there buying 80 millimeter cannons, brand new 80 millimeter cannons, just for the sake of owning one. I mean, they could if they wanted to, but I just think there's a huge pent-up demand for big stuff like that.
Run out and start buying drop-in trigger packs for their AR-15s.
Oh, heck yeah, and drop-in spears.
Sure, but they would find out, just like the military found out, that fully automatic, it's like the bump stock, fully automatic fire is cool, and it's neat to drop a mag now and then. And you're right, maybe they could come up with new kinds of competition or that kind of thing. But the average guy would say, after about the third time he took it to the range, he would say, holy shit, I can't afford to feed this thing. He wouldn't, it wouldn't, I honestly don't think there's that huge amount of demand out there for that.
Like fireworks, you do it once a year, but it's still fun to have that option, even though the rest of the year you just shoot one at a time.
Well, you know how we know that cycle is 100% right? Because of every year that existed between 1903 or whatever, and Browning invented the machine gun, till 1986, May 23rd or something, when they stopped the availability of us to create our own or import them. Every moment between then, nobody was buying machine guns, because exactly what Cycle said. They're just stupid, impractical money hogs. So even if they're available, nobody buys them. Criminals don't use them. They can make them into anything in a machine gun anytime they want.
Yeah, the guys that bought submachine guns. The guys that bought submachine guns were the guys that used them in the war. Guys wanted a Tommy gun. They wanted a BAR, they wanted, because that was something that it had meaning for them, almost like a collector, but it's the same kind of idea.
It's no different than somebody, being in the modern military and wanting, if they could get an M4, they would get an M4, because it just simply reminds them of things that they've done and places they've been.
Right. Well, so I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm just short-circuiting the argument a little bit. I don't buy the argument that there's this huge pent-up demand for machine guns in the American gunning public, and it's going to be like blood, because the next thing, there'll be blood in the streets. Christ, people will be using them to rob candy stores and stuff like that. I honestly don't think that would happen.
Demand, but I think a lot of guys sure would have one.
Yeah, I might, I might own. I would surely like to own a submachine gun. But that's, me. I'm more a collector. So if I was going to own that kind of stuff, I would want the old stuff. And the old stuff is, they aren't making. I mean, you might get a what do you call it, a replica, but you're certainly not going to go out there and buy Brens and crap like that.
Well,
I mean,
there's
I
a
don't think
market
there's
for
that
it.
many of me around. Yeah, but I
There's a
just don't
market
think there's
for the
that
old
many
stuff.
original
There's
ones
a
out
market
there.
for the new stuff, and there's a market for the just give me a drop in trigger pack and sear.
Heck yeah.
I know it's not the real thing, but
And then somebody will make some new thing that like takes 1022 mags and an AR trigger pack and a handguard, but it'll just be some chassis that they made.
exactly. There's people in all those categories.
So I agree with Cycle. I don't think it would be like necessarily like change the world level, the new internet boom or something, or like a real estate boom. But as far as gun community, I think that we'd see, once there's a lack of restriction, I think you'd see people experiment, enjoy, and invest, because they would be like, wow, I'm getting into this. It's just too fun to have a suppressed full auto 22. I mean, that is one of the funnest things.
Yeah, that is something I think that you would see a huge run on. I think you would see a huge run on full auto 22s and 9mm, which are really cheap to run.
Right, that's what I mean. And we'd come up with some sort of just inexpensive polymer, something, junk metal bullet, because shooting galleries and stuff would just go nuts. That would be the funnest thing ever. Suppressed shooting galleries? Holy moly. And there's no fear. We've had this stuff. It's existed. People are good to each other. This concept that whatever, there'd be violence or whatever, is completely driven by people who want to, change. They want to affect society and affect, So anyway, they're trying to create that perception, and they've been successful. Unfortunately, when you create a prohibition, every single day of the prohibition, they're able to stand there laughing and say, it's because of the prohibition that we're safe today. Whereas if we all know that if the prohibition wasn't there, we'd be just as safe.
Well, a lot of it is the way that the prison system works currently is like they arrest so many people on so many charges that get put in jail for so many different things, and a lot of them are non-violent acts, and a lot of them are. But like when it comes down to, hey, who's getting out, it's more like whose time is up or closest to it, not who's going to be a danger to society if we let them out.
Did I piss off Ghost or something?
Oh no, he's got his daughter is traveling, and his daughter's traveling, so he jumped to chat with her on the phone. So he had to jump back in.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at parallels between the fall of Rome and what's happening in the United States today, and it's amazing. I won't go into all the parallels, but one of them is the ban on weapons, because they were having problems towards the end of Rome with people being unstable and being depressed and things like that, and using weapons in public against other people. And so they banned swords in Rome. Like a regular person wasn't able to carry a blade.
Now, are you talking about the YouTube thing on that? Because that was a very interesting YouTube. I think it was like an hour and a half.
Well, there was one that Stefan Molyneux did.
Yes, he's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah, I love Stefan. He's great.
I think that's about an hour and a half, and that is if you get a chance to read that
one's like 3 hours, dude. It's like a 3-hour thing, and he goes incredible. Way in depth.
But it talks about having the displaced class, the low income workers, and it's just incredible, and how the state became the employer of choice, and it just so, like you said, there were so many things about that were just really really neat. But in any event, yeah, if you got rid of all guns laws regarding purchase, transfer, ownership, and style of weaponry. I mean, I wonder if guys would have, is a bazooka an arm? Well, I guess it kind of is, and it's certainly It's certainly portable, and it's something that's used in the military. So
Anything that isn't crew served is a small arm, right, Dano?
Right. I mean,
so a big machine gun wouldn't really be a small arm.
Covered under the NFA.
I think 2 people doesn't count as crew served. I think you need like a team of people specifically trained for something to be considered crew served, right? So an M60, everybody gets trained in an M60. Everybody can pick it up and use it.
Yeah.
But
a Laws rocket's not a crew served.
No, not at all. The only reason we don't have laws are because the projectile explodes. That would be coordinates. That would be an explosive. It would require what I recall licensing, and then the thing itself, the tube is bigger than 50, so it's a
Oh yeah, much bigger.
Double whammy.
But people do. I know people that own 203s, LMT 203s, like actual LMTs. So not impossible to buy large bore destructive devices. It's just, well, although I guess technically possible to buy projectiles, nobody's going to sell them to you. So, effectively.
Well, wouldn't you repeal as part of this whole thing? Wouldn't you repeal the National Firearms Act?
Oh no, yeah, sorry about it. In this scenario, heck yeah. And then here's you said you don't think people would be doing it, and I may be back where you're at. I haven't been to where you're at, so I don't know like land wise. But out here, we have Big Sandy, we have lots of land. I think that what you'd have is a recreational opportunity for stuff like, hey, did you see this in the movies or blah blah blah. There's places where you can rent like time on a backhoe or a big grading machine. Just drive around in a giant sandbox, basically.
Do big dozers and shit.
So there's the same kind of thing. The recreational shooting in Vegas would just get to a level where you're shooting RPGs and laws and stuff. And of course, it would be, some sort of a projectile that explodes with whatever. What am I trying to say? Like entertainment value more than ordnance value, but why not? That's what it's all about recreationally. And then you could, have all kinds of, fun doing like a Top Shot show where they're shooting some kind of large bore, small arm.
Yeah, and I think the incidence of some crimes would probably go up until we started actually punishing the crime, as opposed to until we actually really had punishments for the crime and punishments that fit the crime. So, like using something like that in a crime or that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's still there, and we're not talking about repealing the consequences of using these items irresponsibly or illegally. And again, I guess before 34, I don't know how many large bore things existed before 34, and I don't know if anybody kept records to know if anybody like blasted a bank vault open with a mortar or something, which probably could have happened.
Just Clint Eastwood in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Right, exactly. I'm thinking of like some pre-1934 version of that movie, right? Where that might have had
dynamite to blow open safes.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need a small arm to break into things.
Right.
So
there were all the World War I anti-tank guns of various sorts from Russia, Germany, England, U.S.
What about them?
Yeah, and a lot of those are less than 50 mil too.
Just saying those were around before 1934 and
available.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And nobody was busting open banks, or if it was a super rare thing. So I'm just saying there are instances of when there was a lack of restrictions that people just didn't go nuts because there wasn't a law against it. Like, these laws aren't made because someone did something. A lot of times these laws are created out of nowhere. Somebody's trying to, what is it called? Like, virtue signal or whatever. Like, I think this could be a bad thing, so I'm going to make a law against it. And all of a sudden, we get this jackass law, and 3 generations later, we're all living under an infringement that some jackass thought was a good idea 3 generations ago, and no one's challenged it.
Almost.
So, it's like
when starting out, the farmer had some amount of dynamite for the purposes of blowing stumps out of the ground, because it was a lot easier to do it that way than it was to do it by hand. As each part of this country got developed, dynamite moved with it, and it was all over the place. Yet these farmers didn't turn out to be, massive killers.
Right. And when it was easily available at their fingertips, they knew how to work it comfortably. They were, comfortable with it, and they still had, and then they had the the drunkenness, and they had the whatever tincture of opiates that they could have been addicted to, and the marijuana cigarettes that they could have been crazy on, and they still somehow managed to not wing dynamite at each other constantly, except for in 1941 in Tulsa.
Well, my grandpa was telling me a story years ago about how when he was a little kid, like 10 years old, he would take his dad's truck from the farm, drive it into town as a 10-year-old to the hardware store to buy dynamite to bring home to blow up stumps. Like he did it more than once. And
I didn't hear that exact story, but my grandpa would say kind of weird shit like that about being a kid. Like, I just took the shotgun and went hunting.
The dynamite wasn't regulated because of people doing bad things with it. It was from accidents and stuff. I mean, that's why it was so, just mining accidents, railroad accidents, farming accident. I mean, people being careless or just straight up just an accident. Nobody's fault.
People leaving it all around, like he was saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, that became really common, and that's where you get all the dynamite regulation. That's why it's controlled.
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, if I sent my 11-year-old in my car to go pick up dynamite today, like, A, he's not going to get any. B, he's probably going to get in trouble for driving. And C, if the cops find out what I sent him to do, I'm going to jail.
Right,
well,
but not because
this is for my mom or like this is for my dad, then we'll be right.
Yeah, but 11 years old back then was a lot older than 11 years old now, as I hate to tell you. I mean, back then, 15, 16-year-old kids were getting married.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, I personally remember being 9 or 10 years old, and I had my own 22, and it was not unusual when I got home from school for me to get home, grab the gun, grab a box of shells, grab the dog, and run off into the woods.
I mean, I did
a very normal thing.
I did the same thing, but I think my situation, I mean, I'm 37, so I'm not like a kid anymore, but in the 80s, like it wasn't a common thing, except for where I lived, for kids to go grab 22s, and we'd go onto the horse ranch behind our house because we knew the ranchers, and they'd let us shoot groundhogs and squirrels or whatever, As long as we're not hurting the horses, and we never did. We never did once.
Well, I'll give you my standard thing. God, I got underwear older than that.
I did some research on Dano's dynamite theory here, and that's what I found.
Well, it's no wonder they restricted it then. Jesus.
Good times.
Ain't you lucky we got him? Wait. Yeah, ain't we lucky we got him? All right. So
yeah,
today,
I mean, it is kind of tough. I mean, I remember the year that a kid in our town rolled a tractor and ended up dying because the shifter of the tractor went through him, and they couldn't get enough wreckers there to get the tractor off of him in time. He might have lived, but he couldn't get through it. Well, and it was because there was groundhogs, and they had dug, and he dropped one of the wheels of the thing into a groundhog run, and it just happened to be moving at exactly the right speed, dropped at exactly the right angle, and flipped the tractor over. And I don't remember there being a huge jihad against groundhogs at that point in time. And I don't remember them putting anti-tip mechanisms on tractors.
Well, farming is one of the most dangerous occupations in the United States. I'm not saying it's the most, but it's one of the most. And it's because farm machinery, especially when you go back, but even today, is incredibly dangerous if operated by somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, is immature, or is ignorant.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of second chance with that stuff.
I don't know how we got into farming.
Well, I mean, it was a takeoff.
Well, I was just trying to point out, you had brought up a bit about what causes a lot of these laws is either people act stupid or they misuse stuff, and then everybody else decides that we have to make a law so that never happens again. Well, first off, that never really happens. And
I can relate that to the dynamite. I mean, it's the ignorant, the ill-informed, the immature.
It's always because of the mothers being all protective over their children. They're like, well, little Johnny Thompson flipped the tractor, so therefore I don't want my Johnny to have that problem too. And then they look at guns and they're like, oh, well, little Tommy and Annie are going to get shot unless we do something. So we better pass a law because, I'm not always going to be there to protect them.
Well, that just happened here in Connecticut with Ethan's Law. And the thing that Ethan's Law is supposed to get rid of, it would have had, it's another one of those laws where if you look at the facts of the case, would have had absolutely zero impact. No impact at all. And all it does is criminalize people who, if you store a firearm such that a kid could get at it, even if the kid commits a crime to get at it, then you're responsible. And it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't help at all. I mean, and with Ethan's Law, we're talking about a kid who shot himself in the head with a revolver that was unloaded and trigger locked. He found the gun at a friend's house. They were in the parents' bedroom. They found the gun. They found the ammunition someplace else. It was packaged up something. Now, it may have been in the same closet, but it was not like with the gun. And they were playing with it. They had done this on multiple occasions, and the kid shot himself in the head. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's an example of Darwinism at its finest.
Yeah, I was just going to say Darwin.
Take that little stupid shit the hell out of the gene pool.
It's very sad, and no one likes to say it, and it is sad. I know I had a child die, but there is some truth to what Cycle is saying. But everyone wants to protect the parent who lost the child, and I understand that. But that doesn't mean you enact new laws just a result of every time a child dies, a new law must be passed.
Exactly.
It comes back to personal responsibility.
Well, and manipulation of the message. So when you have very few people who are in charge of, the messages being disseminated and they're agenda based and they're willing to focus on things that, play to a greater agenda, then you're beholden to whatever they decide to disseminate. And we're moving beyond that. So we'll ideally move past that bottleneck or that difficulty, and we'll move on as a society and move past that ability for them to monopolize the message.
Well, it's the whole nanny state. It's the government knows better than you do how everything ought to happen and what should be done and what you should be allowed to do and what you shouldn't be allowed to do. And, that basically, like you were saying before, it stifles innovation. It stops people from being curious about what happens. And, sometimes an accident really literally is just an accident.
Yeah.
A tree gets old and a limb falls down and hits somebody in the head and kills them. You don't go passing a law saying everybody's got to pay for an arborist to come and inspect their property every year.
But people have a tendency to look at government in either one of two ways. I have noticed. Maybe there's a third and a fourth, but generally in one of two ways. Either generally government is part of the solution, or government, even in a small way, can be very much part of the problem, and i.e. gun-free zones, being victim zones.
It's always where they choose to go when they're looking to shoot a bunch of people and not get shot back at, right?
Well, that'd be my pick. There's easier. If you just want to kill a whole ton of people, there's easier ways to kill a ton of people than going into a goddamn movie theater. But I won't talk about that because I don't want to give anybody ideas.
Yeah.
But that's one of those mind games that you play with yourself, saying, what's a scenario I can put together that has nothing to do with the gun control and the gun-free zone shit that you have, and how could I take a lot of people out at the same time? And then you end up with stuff like what happened in Vegas. Here's a perfect example of, it wouldn't have made any difference if that was a gun-free zone or not in the venue, but certainly in the hotel it made a difference.
In today's red flag world, we all need at least to give a little bit of thought directly to what we say, and this goes to what Cycle Camp was referring to, and I agree with you, Cycle Camp. And it shouldn't be that way, because inherently it's trimming off our right to freedom of speech. Can't we talk about theory? No, we can't really.
Well, I blame the media for a lot of what's going on today with all like how many mass shootings there are in the United States. Like, look at what happened with serial killers back in the 70s. I think they stopped reporting on serial killers because they kept having all these instances of copycat killers who would come in, and all these extra people would die because there's people with mental disorder.
They didn't stop reporting on it. There was a public outcry for them to stop it, and that's what stopped them. The media didn't decide, hey, here's what's best for society.
Well, okay, fine. And that's absolutely true. And
well, I think that's important, because if we're going to sit around and suggest that what you're saying is valid, that that we have nothing to do but watch, that we're observers, that's not the case. In the past, the changes were made by people, like say mothers probably, who got fed up with it, and again, that was in the 70s or whatever, 60s and 70s, right? So it was way before any kind of internet or whatever. So I think that might actually be something that's worth investigating a bit. I've used Mothers Against Drunk Driving as an example before of something that was an initiative that was not government based. That was,
Maybe
trying to affect change, and did it in a way that, again, did it without the government interference at all, and then did it at a time before there was internet.
Maybe we should start a new form of activism wherein every time that there's a mass shooting and media covers it in a way that glorifies the person.
How about you call them mass murders on my show? Because we are shooters. We go shooting recreationally on weekends. They take our words. They try to manipulate the story, and they try to manipulate society by calling these people who decide to murder and use and implements of the become infamous. What Psycho was alluding to is more like Oklahoma, or the what do you call it, before the plains, and those kind of things are what if somebody truly wanted to cause carnage and destruction, those are available to people. Those aren't technically difficult. They can be anonymous. I believe what you're getting at there is 100% accurate. That the media is intentionally in whatever the word is, like complicit in this current situation with murderers deciding politically to choose something which makes them infamous, as opposed to things in the past which they tried to be anonymous.
So, well, what I was saying though is every time that there's one of those things that happen, a mass killing, murderers, then we should hold their feet to their fire in some way, saying like, you're using the guy's name, you're putting his picture on front page of the paper, you're doing this, you're doing that, stop it.
Mm-hmm. There's an initiative by Alan Corwin out of Phoenix to do just that, and it's I wish I could remember the name. I'm a fan of Alan's, but I'm not best friends with him. But he has
thing is, though,
it does exactly that. It shames media and encourages them and requests them and requires them to withhold the names of murderers. Go ahead.
I think you guys are putting an awful lot of blame on the media. Honestly, if there wasn't a market, if there wasn't people tuning in and watching this, if there wasn't people who wanted to know these names and wanted to know the bloody
Hold on,
gory
that's
details.
fucking bullshit. That's fucking bullshit. I'm sorry. Because what happens is
sorry. No, it's the
no.
I mean,
What happens is they're all about the ratings. The only thing that they care about is their ratings. So they sensationalize, and they're lazy, and they do things to make their job easier by like exaggerating truths and making things seem like they're worse than they are, so that they can get more clicks and more. It's clickbait on TV is all they're doing, and they've been doing it for years. They know exactly what they're doing.
If they weren't making money at this, if there wasn't an audience that it's tuning into this, they wouldn't be doing it.
Well, there's a massive
they're
audience
obviously
out there
making money.
that's looking for bias confirmation, and the traditional media offers that to them.
The traditional media is dying. We're witnessing the death throes of the traditional media, and that's why they're hanging on to this shit so hard. Is because they're like, oh, it's the only thing we have left that people listen to us about.
Fear.
Yep, exactly.
No, I'm just saying we still have to deal with them until they're gone.
I hear you, but the way that we get rid of them, give them the death throw, is, and I think what Dead Horse is suggesting is that it needs to be the individuals, it needs to be us who makes the decision to stop talking about those things. It's one
Yeah,
of the
guess what?
this show.
News isn't played in my house. No local news, no CNN, no Fox News. It's not allowed in my house. It doesn't play on any TV, on any computer, on any tablet. I don't allow that in my house. So that's one way that I say I'm not tuning into your bullshit. I'm not going to aid to your ratings and let you earn advertising dollars off my views to support this agenda and to put out this message. That's how I fight it, right? But
So how do you know it's
if there wasn't still
I think-
people tuning in,
I think we're fighting it right
wouldn't be
now.
selling it.
Yeah, exactly. We are fighting it right now, and Dead Horse fights it on in the mornings when he does the early watch. That's an alternative to whatever they're doing.
And the bigger we get, the smaller they are, and the more power we get, the weaker they are. And they see that happening on a daily basis, feel it in their pocketbook, see it on their ratings. And the more that happens, the more they're going to double down and increase the fear, ratchet up the sensationalism, and make it all, packaged in a nice, neat way so that the average ignorant American person just watching the news will see what's going on, but not know what's going on because it's not reality.
I wanna make two comments about this, and without getting wicked interrupted and leaped all over. So the first thing is what I don't. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
What I don't want is somebody to say there ought to be a law. Okay, that's the first thing I don't want to hear anybody ever say. There ought to be a law that no one can cover a mass shooting for 3 days. Because you would get rid of a lot of this stuff, a lot of the bad reporting and flights of fancy and all that shit. But I don't want to hear that because I don't want government to try to take care of the problem, because they can't take care of the problem. They've shown they're ineffective. They've shown they can't do it. But I totally agree with Dead Horse and with E as also that the reason that we're having these problems is because we don't have critical thinking skills that are taught in the schools. If you watched a news report and you followed a story that was more than just a 2-hour soundbite kind of story, and you said, here's what they said at the beginning, here's how they course corrected after the first hour, here's how they had a course correct after the 10th hour, here's how they had a course correct 2 days later, you would say, these people have no idea what the hell they're talking about. I am not going to watch them anymore. As Dead Horse is elected to do, and as I have elected to do. I don't get the newspaper. I don't watch the big news on television. And when something bad like that happens, I usually find out about it through social media, and I usually wait a couple of days before I express any opinion at all about what's going on, unless I've seen video personally that hasn't been edited, like people's cell phones and stuff, where I can get a good feel for what's going on. If people were more critical thinkers, the mainstream media today would not be successful. People would just turn them off.
Okay, we're talking about would and could and should, right? So let's look at it realistically in the playing field. Let's move the perspective out. Got the 80s out there that we all lived through. We got the 90s where we got our cell phones and we started to figure out about computers and this thing called the internet, kind of. Got the 2000s where the internet really kicked in. The 2010s, internet's not even a thing. It's an appliance for us now. And we've got social platforms and we're having this conversation. So, and then we've got, what's next and what's next. So we know that cell phones are doing their thing. We know that computers and interactive televisions are doing their thing. And we know the platforms are doing their thing. So, we have some potential idea of what's coming next. So in this playing field, we've got the players, the individual humans that make it all up. And some of us were doing tech stuff in the 90s and in the 2000s, and we're comfortable. And we're probably, if you think of the mass of humans that live in this environment on this playing field, we're this big bell curve. You got the people that are snooping around and doing the stuff first. You got the people that are watching us or them and then doing their stuff after, and then you got a bunch of people who eventually follow through, and then you got the people who are at the end of that bell curve, still on flip phones and haven't used a smartphone yet, right? So if that's the bell curve, What we're talking about here, not paying attention to media, seeing that the platforms are probably going to fail and that we're going to evolve as a community of people who interact using this internet/telephone tech, the same way that we evolved from not having telephones to having telephones, and then that was just a new way that we could all just communicate. And then all of a sudden we had cell phones and we just incorporated that. And, there's the kids and the elites that get the stuff first and figure it all out and capitalize on it and use it. And there's our grandparents that finally, eventually figure it all out, reluctantly. So if we're the people or that we're on the edge of this that are, disregarding media, seeing it for what it is and dismissing it and moving on to the next thing, isn't it logical that there's this bell curve, that there's this wave of people that are, in the midst of figuring that out? And there's a whole bunch of people that once the new options are established, the boom, it's just going to happen. And the old media is gone, the same way that AOL was gone, the same way that MySpace is gone, the same way that newspapers are gone, right?
I mean, eventually it's going to happen. What I'm worried about isn't the people who are awake and seeing this. It's the people who are asleep and watching football, or, too busy with their own life.
Less and less viewers every year. Isn't that stuff going away?
I hope so. I don't know.
I only agree a little bit. The problem is it's not the media, it's the message. Those same set of lying, opinionated thought people that are trying to mind control you by skewing the facts. The reason that we catch them is because of the new media, but they are just going to move into the new media, and you're still going to need that presence of mind to say who the hell telling the truth, who in the hell is talking out of his ass, and be able to dispute that, because I wouldn't have a problem reading a newspaper if the newspaper was giving me factual information without this heavily biased slant.
If it was like a 1930s actual bunch of journalists reporting and not
right, or if it was like Uncle Walter on CBS.
Now, that's a great point. Now, here's a thing that I guess I'm assuming with my optimistic view of the future, because I think I'm fairly certain we're going towards Star Trek future, where we're all just going to be happy. We're all going to figure out how to live comfortably together. Our resources will be plentiful, and we'll enjoy the nuances and flavors of all our, interests and whatnot. So, if we move towards that, I guess I assume that as a collective group of humans, again, like this bell curve, there's some people that are leading the way, there's people that are in the middle, and then there's a big group of people that just kind of move along, and and then there's the people that reluctantly follow. Awareness and scrutiny, isn't that a basic capability that we have? Our brains, it's like, school, whatever. I mean, we drive at 75 miles an hour as a unit together. And I don't care what city you're from, what state you're from, you get on a highway and you drive together with relatively few accidents. And a lot of those are due to the machine failing on us, but it's not always human error. But like we are capable, even what people would disregard as the dumbest of us or the least aware of us, we're still able, we're super smart critters, like we're able to rationalize stuff. So don't you think that once we're given options besides the fed pablum programmed garbage that we're used to be fed, that once you're given some again, right now it's a little tough because you have to go find it, right? But I'm assuming that we're going to come up with a mechanism, that'll distribute content that has more flavor and more opinion and more, grassroots type of data. Once people are given that, don't you think they'll be able to adapt to that and get a level of ability to scrutinize? Or do you think we've lost that as a culture? Or as at least in our community, or in the United States, have we lost that through school or through laziness or through diet or something, or is that still something we can get back again real quick?
I think it's been misplaced for sure. Whether it's lost is time will determine. It's misplaced.
I mean, I honestly believe it's being trained out of us.
I think I do believe. I don't disagree. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that's tinfoil hat at all. I think there are people that would rather have humans sit like cattle in a feedlot, and there are people working adamantly to create. You know, they wouldn't say it that way, but they're trying to create basically a comfortable prison cell that you get you entertained and everything costs money, and you do your little work and your hamster wheel. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, look at the number of people. Remember that 50% of the people are stupid, and 50% of your friends are stupid, and half of them are dumber than dumb. But what I was really getting at here was look at the number of people that cannot do a simplistic logic chain of, if I make this change to society, here are all the bad things that are going to happen. And you guys know who I'm talking about. When they say stuff like, let's put in a minimum wage, and they don't understand the numbers, they don't understand economics, and they say, we're just going to put in this minimum wage and everything is going to be great. Or they say, let's go green, the whole place ought to go green. And they don't understand the actual underlying costs of what things cost, at where things, I mean, God, half of these people in heavy urbanized areas don't even really know where food comes from, for God's sake.
All right. I don't want to disagree with you at all, because you're correct. But let me just pick any point in history, and couldn't you slice the population, and a majority of them are going to be in that same situation, contently not giving a shit about all the cerebral crap? And then there's
sure, let them eat cake, right?
I think the difference is today, though, like if you go back to like medieval times, right? And you could say, okay, 50% of the population of peasants in medieval Europe were below a certain IQ level, right? And that's probably true. The difference is that the intelligent ones who worked hard and were conscientious and took care of their kids had more kids who survived. The next generation was a little bit smarter, right? The people who weren't as smart had less kids that survived. And again, the next generation on average is a little bit smarter. And it's been going up and up and up and up until recently, in the last, 50, 60 years in the United States, our IQ has actually started to drop. Why? Because we tax the people who are really smart and who want to take care of their kids and who are conscientious about their decisions. And we give the money to people who are irresponsible, and they end up having more kids, and their kids are not as smart. And the people who are smart and try really hard and are conscientious and everything have less kids because they know they can't afford them because they're taxed.
And Darwin is not allowed to come out and play his righteous role, which he should, which makes the human race better as time goes on, not worse.
You just described the beginning of the movie Idiocracy.
Well, it's dysgenics, man.
Well, and I pretty much disagree with you, but only on some parts of it. So the reason that the average IQ in America is going down is because American immigrants coming to America previously were all Western civilization immigrants who had IQs of 100, average around 100, or Asians and those guys that had IQs around a 105, 110. And ever since the 60s and 70s, we've started bringing in a lot of immigrants from third world countries where the average IQs are only 85 to 90. And you are now seeing the dilution effect of immigration.
Well, it's more than that. It's the
welfare state.
Yeah, it's the welfare state taking care of people
unintelligent to reproduce. Where previously that didn't happen because there was no welfare. They were not allowed to reproduce and thus create more less intelligent children.
Well, they were allowed to, but whether the kids survived or not was up to the individual.
Would not allow them to because they were not successful.
Exactly. Like no one stopped them from having kids, but no one ensured that their kids were well fed throughout life. Like that's up to the parents. And if the parents aren't able to do that, that's not always, but it is a direct correlation to the amount of intelligence that you have. And when you're passing on traits, one of them happens to be your brain.
Okay, so I think we may come at it a little differently, but I think we're on the same page. And one of the problems was prior to the welfare state, an immigrant that came into this country that was a highly skilled society, whether it was physical skills or mental skills, didn't really make any difference. He would self-deport. I mean, if he was here for a year and he couldn't get work and things were not looking good, he'd go home.
Right.
Yes.
And a lot of people did.
And now, because of the welfare state,
No
it's
one
like
does.
a magnet to draw these people. And once they get here,
They never leave.
why would they leave?
Yeah.
You know, 70. I read a statistic the other day that 75% of all immigrants, and we're talking illegal immigrants now. We're not talking legal immigrants. In fact, I shouldn't even use the word.
Yeah, just call them illegals then, because then
the illegals. 75% of all illegals use some form of state aid.
Yeah. When you have a no-fail shelter, a no-fail food system, those people will continue to reproduce in numbers that are unabated because they cannot fail in regards to shelter. They cannot fail in regards to food.
All right, I don't know where this went dark. I'm optimistic. So that's a lot of voters, a lot of people that are interested in being in a country with individual freedom. And I'm only a couple of generations from there, so I don't come from some sort of homeland where, you know, my grandparents kicked the shit out of an Indian or nothing. So I don't know. I'm not going to go down this fucking road though. We're a melting pot. We are a accumulation of all that.
But we're failing to melt.
We don't need to melt. I think we're a stew, right? We're not a conglomerate cheese.
Right. We're not a homogenous thing. But the question you got to ask yourself is, are the people coming for freedom or are they coming for free stuff?
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying this is the fucking Daily Gun Show, not some fucking whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
These are things that have bigger consequences. And yeah, I mean, nothing you guys said was incorrect necessarily, but also let's keep in mind that in the days that you're comparing it to, there's a heck of a lot more people on the planet than there was back then. So like you talked about deporting, that was an option. Like that's less an option when your country's shit and there's a billion people there. And even though it's not as great as you wanted here, it's better than it was there. You know, so that might influence somebody's decision not to go back, right?
Sure. And you're right. We're kind of far off the topic of.
And here's the thing: we're a rich
like
country. We're a rich country. We could adjust our spending. We can adjust our preferences and things just a hair, and educate everybody who's here, and just kick the shit out of the rest of the planet and lead by example and get into space and quit worrying about slice and pie here and start baking some new cake with asteroids and shit and turn it into Star Trek. So all this petty shit is again, I think lack of options given to us by assholes with agendas that want to see us fight, because to them it's a lot easier to have a bunch of us fighting amongst ourselves without looking up at the cells that we're in or the speakers that the urgings are coming from. But as we have conversations like this and others, I believe that we're changing that playing field. We're changing that dynamic. We're giving people every single day something else, an alternate to listen to be part of. They can say, this sucks. I'm going to go do my own. I'm going to do this better. These guys are a bunch of jerks that are all wrong. I'm going to do it better. And then they create more of this. We didn't get a chance to really get into it tonight because it's already getting late and stuff. But I got to change the subject because we've just been going all over the place with this one. But there is some interesting stuff that we could dig into this in future shows. But it is also the anniversary of the 1977 revolt, Cincinnati Revolt, where the people of the NRA got together with the sort of coordination of Neil Knox and like noon or whatever on the whatever day of the NRA National Convention in Cincinnati, they all put on a hunter blaze orange cap to show their unification or unity or whatever. And that was enough to influence the membership to take out the board of directors of the NRA, change the NRA, influence their decision, change their decision from leaving Washington, D.C. and becoming less of a political entity and fleeing to Colorado to become a some kind of a wildlife and hunting organization, and created the ILA and everything as a consequence. So we had an opportunity just a few days ago at the national meeting in Indianapolis, and we saw a lot of empty seats. Imagine if they would all been wearing Tony Simon's blue
two-way for E shirt or some kind of hat with a color or something, blue preferably, because it's awesome, to show unity, and to maybe influence some of those old people that were sitting in the audience at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning at the NRA show in Indianapolis, and because they were influenced by the Wayne crew who went around suggesting that all the people that were upset were influenced by Bloomberg, and that there was a bunch of empty seats, not doing anything there. So that was an opportunity missed. We're all sitting here, result of that, we're all involved with that to some extent, one way or the other. And let's remember what came before us, so we don't forget, so we don't repeat too much of this shit. And anyway, just wanted to take a second, throw that out there. I don't know if anybody wants to chat about 1977.
Well, I wasn't born yet.
Yeah,
So
what was I? I was like 30, 24 maybe, something like that. But 77, 50, I was 22 or 21 going on 22. But that was a pretty ballsy move. You gotta admit that was a quite, it's certainly something that's never happened since, and it just goes to show what can happen when a bunch of people decide to band together if they have a common goal. And that was the problem. You finally got to the point where the perceived softness of the NRA became a sticking point with a majority of the membership, and they now had a common goal to shoot at. And somebody mentioned it earlier in the chat, just as I came on, about, hey, when bad things happen, that's when you get the impetus to band together to do something. It's like having that common enemy, having that common problem that everybody agrees needs to be solved. And it's got to get bad before it happens again. And I'm frankly surprised that people don't perceive it now as being that way. I mean, with the stuff that's going on and with the hijinks that NRA ILA has been pulling, I just have a really tough time understanding why more people are not, up in arms about stuff like that.
So
Yeah,
does it come down to getting the message out now? Because does it just come down to getting the message out to people?
I think.
Well, go ahead. I got a Facebook post from somebody. Not that this is really terribly thing, but it was one of the guys on the NRA board of directors, and he was making some remarks about the NRA and that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, and I bluntly right there in the comments asked, I said, so are you one of the guys who unanimously voted to reinstate St. Pierre, LaPierre? I mean St. Pierre. I'll be all right. And the answer I got back. First of all, the guy that made the comment never said a thing. One of his lackeys came on and said, oh, and he basically confirmed what I originally said, which was he ran unopposed, cast one vote, that's it. And they just publicized it as being a unanimous thing. But my next question was, why aren't you making any noise about this? If you disagree with what's going on, why aren't you using your social media? Here's your social media presence. You reach me. Why aren't you saying something and doing something about it?
Well, I think part of the problem is.
Did he have an answer to that, though?
No, he did not.
I think part of the problem is sensory overload, right? There's just so much information coming from so many different sources, conflict in so many different ways that a lot of people don't know how to sort it out, And so when you hear one thing about the NRA, for instance, and then you hear another thing about the NRA, a lot of people's inclination is just to tune it all out and go with, what they know historically, right?
Well, obviously, yes. But here's the thing. There was a time when the people looked at the internet and said that. They said, oh, there's just too much stuff out there. There's no way to sort all that out. It's neat that it's a nice concept. It's a nice theory that you've got all this information, but really, what good is it? What application is there for it? And then Netscape, and then Google, and now we we think that's absurd.
Well, but there is the problem of, because there are so many sources, and there's only so many hours in a day. There's so many sources. People do, and I'm guilty of this as anybody else. They do tend to tune into channels that reinforce their own bias. So it's very difficult to cross-pollinate across these different channels inside these social media, because people have a tendency to stick with stuff they're comfortable with or sings a song they want to sing.
I think it's another layer of divide and conquer, in my opinion.
So what I would say to that is, it's not just, so we can go out there and ask people, hey, do you want to be on the show? Hey, this is what we talk about. But how many people are actually going to take that chance when they're not in our same realm? You know what I mean?
Well, this is where the neutrality of the media, the medium, is so important, because if you tag stuff and keyword stuff and all that, and it does show up like it's supposed to, based on the growing group of gun rights advocates and all that kind of stuff, it is going to start cross-pollinating until they decide that they don't want to promote that stuff, and they change their algorithms to downgrade your stuff from showing up in searches. So I think that the internet could be a great vehicle for having these kinds of conversations and discussions, but unfortunately it's in the hands of people who get to run it the way they want to run it, because it's a business. And if they decide that's not the message they want exposed, they just tweak the algorithm, and now your stuff falls down to the third page of results or the fourth page of results.
What was the name of the tavern? What was the name of the tavern where they planned the Revolutionary War?
The Green Dragon Tavern.
It'd be like the Redcoats having microphones, or like the bartender works for the Redcoats. You know what I mean? Like that's how it is today.
That did happen. So I agree with his cycle. I don't disagree at all. However, when I was using my description before of the playing field, and some of us being using the internet back in the day, or using computers, and being comfortable with the thing and understanding the internet maybe a little bit before some other people became accustomed to the internet and then familiar with the internet. And as we look at things like newspapers giving way into radio, and then into television, and then into cable television, and then now into the internet, and then from the internet into YouTube, I think when we are looking at this conversation or this era in the future, looking back, I think we actually could be I think we are, we just don't realize we're in the time where traditional media has lost. And looking back with 2020 hindsight, we're going to be right in the middle probably, or somewhere in the midst of the YouTube, Facebook domination of message, dissemination of message. And I foresee the next evolution is when people get frustrated with training wheels / Big Brother balance or give and take that you have to have with the Facebook and YouTube giants. And as people again become more familiar, as technology becomes less complicated, easier to deal with, it becomes more of an appliance and less of a skill to navigate, we are going to see people leave the platforms and go to whatever's next. I can't say what's next. If I could, I'd be rich. But you know what I'm saying? I think that if we looked at it in 2020 hindsight, we're going to see that we're in the era of Facebook and YouTube dominating the message and trying to manipulate and being the players that the actors are using to manipulate.
When people are smart, they're going to see that eventually. And they're gonna find an alternate source eventually, and that'll be the death of what is current. You know what I mean? Because there's always going to be someone who's trying to take the reins, who's trying to take the wheel, and trying to steer the whole boat in a way that maybe the boat doesn't want to go. And by the way, we're the boat.
I think you give credit to people a little too much there. So you just pointed out that there's the sensory overload, right? And people are going to come and look at what they want to look at. That's it. That's what they're going to do. It's up to us to actually get into those other platforms and talk to those people and get our message out that way to reach those kinds of audiences that we actually don't reach.
I think it's up to us to make our message so strong and so resilient that people will come to us naturally and find us naturally, you know. And I'm not saying me and you or just this chat, but like anybody who wants to have their voice out there and be honest and truthful and espouse a point of view that's, you know, maybe more libertarian, maybe more pro Second Amendment, is really going to have to get their ducks in a row as far as their argumentative skills and every little facet of different things that people are going to throw at them, and have answers for all of that. You know, we really got to make sure that our swords are sharp, and, you know, our boots are ready to go.
No, that's kind of different tools, but could have been said at any time. The responsibility of anybody in any time in history, right?
Well, I think it's more incumbent upon us now because of the situation that we're in, where the media is dying, and hey, we're becoming the new media. Like us here in this chat, not only this chat, but like us here right now are doing the job of the media. We're talking about current events, we're talking about situations, we're talking about philosophy and psychology and things going on, and we're trying to come up with answers. I don't know if successfully all the time, but at least we're giving it a shot, and it's an honest shot, and people see the honesty of it. And as long as we're being honest, I think we're doing everything we can, you know, and I think congratulations and kudos to you, G-Webs, and you know, everybody who puts on a chat. I mean, I'd like to get to the point where I had enough of an audience to do it, and I'm happy to participate in other people's chats, but I think that it's an amazing thing that we're doing.
All right, so we live in a country that has a constitution, right? A declaration of what an individual has and what the government has to leave us alone about, and some rules on how we can live together peacefully or whatever, without bugging each other too much. And then it's got a Bill of Rights with a First Amendment that gives us freedom of speech, which we all appreciate, and we are a result. Our culture, our people, our freedom, everything is a result of that freedom of speech, that ability for us all to participate as equals and tolerate other people's point of view without going to all kinds of crazy extremes. And then we have a freedom of press and all the other stuff. And then we got a Second Amendment, which is pretty cool too, even though I'm not talking about that. So we got this freedom of press. And then we had a bunch of people who were being in the world back when we started this whole little experiment. We had a bunch of people in the world who were being told what to do by kings and by churches and by states and I don't know, who, somebody else. And we said, screw all that, right? We're going to make a constitution. We're individuals. We're free. So people that come hang out here are, you know, with that mindset. And then we created the free press so that we could say what we want to each other and assemble and all that kind of cool stuff. So then we started to say that wasn't enough for us. We want to be able to do something. We want to be able to like do something with this freedoms we got. So we created firearms. We created interchangeable parts. We created the Industrial Revolution. But we also created, I mean, we didn't invent the printing press, I'm trying to remember, but pretty damn influential in what we're doing with the printing press because we had something to do with our printing presses. We weren't the state issuing a book or a church issuing a book, right? We were a bunch of people like Benjamin Franklin and shit and Dano who had something to say. So they printed it and we developed tech, you know, so that we could disseminate information amongst ourselves. So we come from that stock. We come from a country of people who were like writing the stuff, creating the tech to get the word out, and then absorbing it and appreciating it and debating it, right? We act like politicians are crazy today. They were crazy back in the old days, right? And, you know, it's probably a factor of, you know, you had to sit on the back of a train and yell. So, you know, crazy stuff happened. And then you heard what he said from somebody who heard what he said, right? So things got exaggerated. You know, it's a factor of the time. You fast forward, we create the radios and, you know, Colt looking for something to do, creates copper wire, hooks up with some guy, Marconi or whatever his name is, invents Morse code. Or I guess it was Morris. And, you know, whoa, all of a sudden we got radio and telemetry, and now we've got radio that we're listening to, and we've got radio shows and stuff, right? So we're expressing our First Amendment and our Second Amendment, you know, not Second Amendment, but our freedom of press and our freedom of speech with the radio, right? Then we get television, we invent, you know, television and cable and that kind of entertainment. And again, we're a stock of people that absorb that. We take the new technology, we grab it with gusto, and we use it, not always perfectly, but we're capable of keeping up with the times. Then we invent, that wasn't enough for us. We invent the fucking internet, and we free the world's information. We democratize information around the world. And again, we keep up with that. We get on board. We figure out how computers work. There are appliances in our homes. Our grandparents can use them, right? Our children can use them. Our babies can use them. And we're like, this is neat, but it's not enough. We need phones. We need to be able to do this wherever the fuck we are. So we create phones, and now we incorporate that. And children and babies and old people have the internet at their disposal. I mean, this is fucking Star Trek in some extent. And this is the stock we come from. There's no way somebody's going to tell me that we're not going to be able to keep up with whatever the hell is next when YouTube's logarithm and fucking Facebook don't tell us how to hate each other. I think that we are thirsty for whatever the fuck is next. We will create what's next. We'll be the first to use that shit that's next, and we'll use it with freedom of speech and freedom of press to fucking change the world again. And shit, there's challenges in the world like fucking eating and staying alive and shit. And fuck, we can go accomplish those. Once we get these assholes to stop us from fighting each other, and our challenge is like the space race, like let's feed the fucking planet real quick so we can get up into space easier. Those are challenges that Americans are waiting for, that we're thirsty for. Give like California and New York the goal of like, you save Asia and you save Africa, and let's see who wins. Fuck sports. Like, give us a real challenge. So I think we've got potential in the future here to be fucking leading the way again, which we've fucking done every single fucking time there's been an evolution in tech or freedom of speech. Or am I crazy?
Nope. It's pretty much spot on.
You're not crazy, but I don't know if I see, and I don't mean to be pessimistic, I don't, but looking at
my Wheaties, you're getting ready to piss in my Wheaties right now.
I'm just looking at where the wind's blowing, and it seems to me like the wind is not blowing in the direction of Star Trek being our future. That's all.
Okay. Your perception of where the wind's blowing or where the wind's actually blowing, because that's part of what I think G-Webs is getting at here. The manipulation of, pitting us, every little sector, every little corner, every little crevice, anything, anybody and everybody, right? Any little difference, pitting them all against each other has amplified, God, thousands of times fold as technology has grown. And we need to be able to see that, recognize that, and look past it. And as more people do that, I think more people are going to understand that, our neighbors, there's people out there that vehemently disagree with us, and they don't hate us, which is basically what we're being told.
And that's going to have to be the end of this show. Now, I don't know where Clover's at, if he's got a second wind or not, but him and I are actually addressing something that we watched yesterday that is going to blow everybody's mind, I think, once we actually start addressing it or come up with a way to conceptualize it. So I'm going to leave us with that cliffhanger, because that's a good way to make a bunch of money on this show. And that's all this show's really about, Daily Money Show. If you'd hold the logo upside down, it's a money bag holding another money bag. So we've all been manipulated.